So I'm handing over to Marton now, who is going to talk about his experience as an author. And so I'll stop sharing and
Yep.
Make you co-host.
Am I good to go?
Yes, please. You can,
Okay.
if you introduce yourself. And
Yeah. Hello, my name is Marton Ribary. I'm an early career research fellow at the University of Surrey School of Law. My background is in philosophy and the historical humanities. I worked on historical legal texts for my master's and my PhD, particularly rabbinic law and Roman law. The current project I've been conducting focuses on these two as well with computational methods. I carry out large-scale analysis, and I'm just moving into the field of rule modeling with computational methods. So during the first year, I started a large-scale analysis of Roman law, focusing on Emperor Justinian's digest, which was created in the early 6th century. And I wanted to carry out some statistical analysis to see some clusters in the text of this massive 1 million word corpus, which encompasses the entirety of Roman law. Is the single most important source. So I'm sharing the screen while I speak. It's better to see my screen rather than my face. And part of that process, which led to a traditional research paper, as Barbara said, also led to a data paper, which was published in JOHD. I also tried to share some links in the chat, if that's possible somehow. I'll do it later after this. Sorry, just bear with me. Yeah, here we go. So there are some links in the chat if you want to follow the slides. So that led to a data paper published in JOHD. I must admit that I did not know what a data paper was. I did not know that I need to create a database or a data set in order to I didn't realize that is in itself valuable. I was approximately 6 months into my research, working on the digest, trying to put everything in the right order, cleaning the information just to prepare it for the computational analysis I was planning to do. And at this moment of frustration, approximately 4 months into the work, I had the chance to give a departmental presentation in the law school to a set of colleagues. And during the Q&A, it became clear that the database itself is valuable. I received just as many, if not more, questions about the database, how it is structured, how it could be used for other purposes than mine, which was the cluster analysis and some linguistic analysis. And that was the moment I realized that the database itself is valuable, not just to receive credit, which is also nice, but also to give colleagues a chance to start with the analysis straight away, to take a database off the shelf in a structured format and save that month and month of work which I carried out. So well, the data paper itself describes the database. It is complementing a database saved in a repository. And incidentally, I also used Figshare for that purpose. if you scroll down from the data paper after the abstract and the keywords and the DOI, the first thing you see is the URL for the repository location. If you click on that, that guides you to an outside location. This time it is Figshare, which looks like this. Where I simply store the major the database, which is in this case in a SQLite database format, some sample queries that you can run on the database, a README file. This is extremely important, and a graph for illustration. So this is already a structured, documented work. And if one downloads this database file and opens in an online SQLite viewer, you could see the structure of the database, which, for example, this is the text. Try to make this work. Okay, it's not as easy as I thought. So you can run queries on this, and I included some queries here, SQL queries, just to show the number of lawyers included in the database, when they lived, from what time, the text itself, and everything can be queried in a nice structured format. So this is one thing which complements the data paper. The data paper is based on a database saved in a repository. In my case, there is also another repository which is a GitLab repository, where you can find not just the database, but the code that I run on it, some intermediary files, if that's useful for anyone, flat files, one result of which was the database. So you can think about that the Figshare repository is already a structured, limited, and sort of controlled publication, and this GitLab repository is a bit more chaotic, even though it's good practice to keep everything nice and nicely documented. So the documentation on the GitLab repo is just as exhaustive as it is in Figshare. So if we go back to the database, I see this data paper, which gives an organized, neat front door for the work that I've carried out for the data. What I really liked during the submission process, that there was a template I could work with. You could see it as restrictive. For me, it was extremely helpful that I know what areas I had to cover. These are overview with just a general context of the database, the methods, the technical steps I had to take in order to create the database. Here it is at a slightly meta level, and the reader is instructed to go to either the Figshare repository or the GitLab repository to see the actual code by which these steps were carried out. Then comes the data description, again in a highly structured format, which is very easy for the reader to understand what is there. And possibly the most important, as Barbara also emphasized, is section 4, the reuse potential. So the data paper gives you the chance to think about not why this data is why this data is good for your research, but it also forces you to think about why this data is good for others. And this is potentially the most interesting part of the publication. Yeah, the submission process was straightforward. It was extremely quick. I received a very helpful review, which gave me the chance to rework this data paper, make it more concise, make it stronger, cover some areas that I forgot to do. And I think it was about a month from submission to acceptance and publication. So the copy editing process, the typesetting process, they were all extremely quick, helpful, and courteous. Yeah, so I think that's it. That's it from me. So I'm just trying to advocating the data papers and emphasize that they are important in their own right, and this is something that maybe traditional humanities scholars like myself we didn't realize when we start our journey working with data. So I think I stop sharing and I give it back to Barbara.
Thank you, Martin. There were a few questions popping up in the chat, mainly about repositories and why you chose Figshare. So there's a bit of a discussion going on, which is really interesting to see. Do you have any tips about your experience with Figshare and why you chose Figshare? I might have recommended it to you. We were working on some project together, but
yeah, I selected JOHD to start with. It wasn't Figshare that I started with, and then JOHD. I knew about JOHD first, and then Figshare. So I started with the list on the JOHD page. There are not much difference between them. So I would say it is more an aesthetic consideration. They basically do very similar things. What I considered how likely that the repository will be supported, if the ethics behind the repository, whether it is owned by some money making company or not, and finally whether the repository is supported by the institution that I'm currently in. And that time Figshare was in a partnership with my university, so I could rely on some support from my university staff. Unfortunately, by the time I got there, that support was discontinued. But Figshare was very easy to use. I clicked around these repositories, and the layout was very simple. Creating an account was simple, and I used it for this purpose. That for someone like me as a newbie, Figshare was easy to use and possibly one of the largest and most well known. I can't keep track of the questions.
I have been looking at it. Thank you. Yes, of course, Sasha pointed out that some institutions have their own repositories, like University of Cambridge and others. And there was also a very useful reference from 2015, where to keep research data, DCC checklist for evaluating data repositories. And so that's really handy. And then there's a question for Martin. I can see your data paper was published very recently, but have you seen any signs yet that your data is being reused?
According to the citations, no. It is indeed very new. This is part the fact that it has not been reused could be for two reasons. First, that it is very new. Three, unlike Monty Python. It is very new. Second, that maybe I should have done a more aggressive campaign publicizing the data to make colleagues aware that it exists, so that the life of the database does not stop at the point when I publish the data paper, and all of us we try to we sit back and think that it just does the job on its own. It doesn't. And third, that my setting is extremely traditional. Roman law, the study of Roman law is extremely traditional. It's done with good old medieval methods. And that's not a criticism, it's just a fact. This is not my background. I will never be able to do that kind of juristic philological analysis that my Roman law colleagues do. But it also means that they are probably not as open about an alternative method. I'm very lucky to have a mentor who is open, but himself a very traditional scholar. And something needs to change if someone in the Roman law field shows interest in this kind of work. What you need to start? You need to start somewhere.
Thank you, Marton, for sharing your experience and your context. It's really useful to have that it was, while it's still fresh in your mind. There was a bit of a discussion going on about the citation of data set, and then also a question for me on reuse of data in JOHD data papers. If we have any info on that. That's a good idea for a study that we could do. I'll add it to my to-do list. JOHD hasn't published that many papers yet. It's still growing and trying to establish itself. So there is that. So in a way that should make it life easier to track the reuse of data. So we'll look into it and yes, watch this space. Great, thanks, Marton. So we are 1 minute early.
May I add?
Yeah, please.
So maybe it's also worth just noting that there are two layers, or in this case three. Again, I'm being Monty Python. 3 layers of sharing data, and this upper layer is a data paper in JOHD. The second layer is your structured database published in a repository like Figshare, and the third one is a more extensive repository with all the codes, documentations, files in a dump folder, everything in a other repository, which is generally either GitHub or GitLab. And I see these 3 layers, they work in tandem. And you wouldn't stop at Figshare. You would have a GitLab or a GitHub as well. It is important to have your code open to make the creation of the database reproducible. And also, if you want colleagues to use your data, then they could look at your code and copy paste lines from it for their own purposes, modify it for their own purposes. So there's just one note about the 3 layers.
Yeah, very good point. And the synergy between traditional research papers, data repositories, data papers, and code papers is a really interesting one, and one that is being is establishing itself slowly. So thanks for making